I remember seeing colours and designs by closing my eyes very tightly. I remember glimpses of activity in orange windows at night. I remember Christmas tree lights reflected on the ceiling. I remember taking an IQ test and coming out below average. I've never told anyone that before. I remember my father trying to get splinters out of my fingers with a needle. I remember green grass knee stains. I remember not understanding how a baby could come out of such a small hole, and I still don't. I remember looking for four-leaf clovers, but not for very long. I remember when I was very young, telling an adult that I wanted to be a fireman or a cowboy when I grow up, but I don't really remember wanting to be either. I remember queer bars. I remember leaning up against walls in queer bars. I remember standing up straight in queer bars. I remember suddenly being aware of how I am holding my cigarette in queer bars. I remember wondering if I looked queer. I remember hating myself after a group gathering for being such a bore. I remember filling ice trays too full and trying to get them back to the refrigerator without spilling any. I remember pulling the long, stringy things from the centre of honeysuckle blossoms and sucking up the drop of honey that comes out with them. I remember when atheist was a scary word. I remember catching myself with an expression on my face that doesn't relate to what's going on anymore. I remember trying to figure things out, life, trying to get it all down to something basic and ending up with nothing except a dizzy head. I remember Monday mornings, Friday afternoons. I remember Saturdays. I remember spooky, when all of a sudden someone you know very well becomes momentarily a total stranger. I remember that life was just as serious then as it is now. This is I Remember by Joe Brainard. And I would like to talk to you about it. First of all, I thought now that I've entered the pantheon of booktubers, it would be time to edit pretentious, vloggy intros to my videos. So, hope you enjoyed. We got through January. Me and whoever is watching. It was bleak. It's pretty dark, murky, gross. But good reading weather, I would say. So I read 6 books in January, and I'm going to talk to you about them. They're all gay books, and very different types of gay books. So this is probably the most unique of the books that I read. Absolutely it is. Because it's almost a poem. It follows a repetitive narrative structure. It's just clauses that go, I remember blank, I remember blank, I remember blank. When I realised that's what it was, I was unsure of how whether that would become annoying to repetitive. And actually it's so meditative. And if you were a writer, or if you would like to write, I would really recommend, and almost you feel that you have to when you're reading this, I would recommend writing your own version and just creating a series of statements that begin, I remember, because you end up with these tiny little fragments of your identity that just sort of appear. Things that you just don't take a moment to look at in their tiny sort of fragmentary insignificance. So many of these entries are very mundane. Things like types of cereal, TV shows, celebrities, and they're all from 50 years ago. Joe Brainard wrote this in 1975, I want to say, and somehow you completely understand all of them, even the ones that are outdated and we don't have nostalgia for anymore. You get the sense of the same nostalgia. I think that's so impressive. When you write your own version, you realise how hard it is to create a clause that gives enough context to your memory for a reader to understand and connect with it. And that's what's so impressive about this, is that it's these tiny little moments of someone's memory that constitute an entire life. So definitely the best thing I read this month, and I would really recommend it, especially if you write. But either way, I think it gets you thinking about your life in an incredibly important way. So that's Joe Brainard, I Remember. Definitely 5 stars. Another book that I read in January, which I would say is probably my second favourite after I Remember, is definitely Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl, which I don't know how I hadn't read, because I've been hearing about it so often and I knew the broad plot beats, which I will explain for you. So Paul Polydorus is a shapeshifter, and we use the pronoun he throughout the story, but Paul takes many different forms throughout the book. What the hell is that? This is just fallen out of my book. I think my girlfriend... Is anyone a nerd who knows who this is? That my girlfriend was... I gave this to my girlfriend and they're using it. They must be using this as a bookmark. Nerds, chime off in the comments. Who's your guy? Paul Polydorus is a gender studies student in 1993 in Iowa who can shapeshift into different genders, but only in very subtle ways, enough that you would probably recognise Paul but see Paul as a girl or see Paul as a boy. And we follow Paul through a series of important and quite kind of historical queer moments in America. Paul goes to Michigan Women's Music Festival, which was controversial for their trans-exclusive stance. And it's fascinating because there's no direct transphobic confrontation in this book, but there's this constant sense of questioning of how do you feel that Paul, as a shapeshifter and as a girl in Michigan Women's Music Festival, how do you feel that he is there? How does he feel that he is there? How does he occupy that lesbian space when he has a biological female body? He has a girlfriend for a long time, so he goes in books. In this book, he is both a gay man, a straight man, a lesbian. He really does everything, and it's just like so fun and so exciting and so hot. This is a really hot book. You really root for Paul. Some people don't like this book. It does have it's very reference heavy, but they're cool references. It's a lot of references to the music of the time, stuff that maybe you would need to have some context for. But I don't feel like you need that context to have a good time with this book. It's very well written, very engaging, very fun. And it's got some really exciting sections that really move away from the plot of the book. Sort of myth-like fairy tale stories of shapeshifters or of people discovering their sexuality or gender, which kind of give it a slightly mythical quality, slightly magical. You think there might be a sort of essence to Paul, but it's never really fully explored, that kind of magical nature of Paul's shapeshifting. I could talk about this book for a very long time. I would really recommend it. It's fun. It's just so fun. So that was that one. And I will return it to my girlfriend. This is not my girlfriend. So continuing with the themes of gender, shapeshifting, fluidity, I read a book that I am really annoyed I hadn't read before. Some really great books this month. I actually have had such a good time reading. I read The Left Hand of Darkness, Ursula K. Le Guin. I've been meaning to for ages,
And actually, because I studied English for a long time, this really felt like returning to the kind of classics. It's fantastic writing. Obviously, a bit of a switch writing style from Paul Takes a Form and Mortal Girl to Left Hand of Darkness. This one's a lot more complex. Not that that's not complex, but it's a lot more sophisticated. It's been a long time since I've read some sci-fi, and what's lovely about it is that it is very readable sci-fi. Le Guin writes like you really understand the world. It's not overwhelming you with world building, even though you can feel that she put a huge amount of effort into the world building. I had a lot of thoughts on this book. It's very, very steeped in mythology, so a bit like Paul Takes a Form. You have sections that completely divert from the plot, that are fragments from the history of the planet Gethin. Winter is what they call it as well. It's an ice planet, which an envoy called Genli is exploring in an attempt to bring this planet into a confederation of planets. And it's so applicable to our world. At the time that I was reading it, we had this a lot in the news around Trump, Greenland, Venezuela. And a lot of this book is the politics and the dynamics of power in the planet Gethin. You're so aware that Genli has come to encourage this entire planet to form to unite with his confederation of 83 planets, something like that. But even when he gets there, he realizes that there's so much fighting between the kingdoms on Gethin that it's going to be almost impossible. Really good sci-fi, I think, leaves you at the end of a book with this feeling of how vast space is, how small we are, how short the human lifespan is. And really good sci-fi makes you feel that without it being terrifying and without it feeling like a bad thing. And I think this does it really well. There's almost a comfort in it, how small we are, how insignificant the fights are between the kingdoms in our world, and how solvable they are. It's a very human story, very relatable. You follow alongside Genli, Estraven, who is the Prime Minister who is exiled and who accompanies Genli on his voyage. And they have a sort of slightly homoerotic dynamic, and it's interesting because there is not really an idea of homosexuality on this planet, because there is only one gender on the planet. Or in that sense, there's no gender because there's no binary. Everyone is the same biology, physicality, which lends them all the pronoun he, which I think is something that has been criticised for Ursula K. Le Guin, because obviously we wouldn't now give the default neutral pronoun of a person that the pronoun he. It implies that the default is male, whereas this book without that is quite radical in the sense that everyone is gender neutral, and for a few days of the month grows the genitalia of male or female, and they don't get a choice in it, and they could swap. They could one month be one and one the other. And the narrator finds this very disturbing, but by the end of the book, having spent a long time getting to know the planet and getting to know Estraven, Genli actually finds the humans with their binary quite disturbing. So it's interesting the way that he gets his head around it quite quickly. And they sort of have this interesting dynamic where Genli thinks in binaries and Estraven doesn't. And it's the whole title, The Left Hand of Darkness, comes from this piece of Gethenian mythology, that the left hand of darkness is light and that the left hand of light is darkness. We have suffering so that we can have pain. We have light so that we can have dark. That is the deep feeling that is explored in this book. And alongside all of that, it is a fantastic plot, fantastic writing, wonderful world building, some amazing stuff around telling the future, some really interesting religious world building, and it was a very cozy read because a lot of it's set in this cold, dark planet. And I had a really nice day where I just wandered around London, went into this really old cozy pub, sat, read like half of this book, felt so kind of inspired. So another fantastic read from January. They're about to get a little bit lighter. Okay, so maybe it's not fair that I've gone from Ursula K. Le Guin to this book, but this is definitely the worst book I read this month, and possibly the worst book I've read in the last few years. This is You're Dead by Sam Sachs, and I was really hoping to like this book. This is about a non-binary activist, early 20s, called Ezra, who lives in New York and who self-immolates. Will YouTube like that? Sets themselves on fire at a Trump rally. You think it probably is a Trump rally. They're all gathered around a tower in New York. As Ezra burns, we see their life flash before their eyes and everything that led them to that moment. And I actually thought, that's really fascinating. Want to read more books with non-binary protagonists. But I really, really despised this writing style. And I don't really like tearing into books loads, because apparently Sam Sachs, super lovely person, I'm sure. And there were parts of this that I liked. I just wouldn't probably recommend it to anyone. So let me give you a sense of this writing style. Here is a section I quite liked. It's very edgy. The gas moves around us like new weather. Alone together and breathing in poison. All my language won't be enough. Only substitutions will do. My eyes are two sick onions. My eyes are goats slaughtered wrong. My eyes, twin libraries burning. Mayday is, of course, also what the pilot says when the plane starts going down. A street medic finds me vomiting yellowish heat across the sidewalk. The words that came to mind were impressive but aimless. This is a deeply apathetic book. It really hates the idea of love. It hates the idea of hope. And that's because we have a very depressed main character. And it's probably accurate to many people's experiences. That doesn't tell me why I should want to read it. There's an quite telling section where Ezra talks about their favourite books. I dive into books where the ordinary is made to seem epic. Books that help me remember to enhance the minutiae of the common minute, where I can figure myself as the protagonist of my own small story, poking my head into meat lockers, shining my flashlight onto silent rooms stacked high with electronics. Books where, even if all you're doing is guarding some flowers, someone's got to end up dead. They like Giovanni's Room, Mrs. Dalloway, and Annie Salinger, which I think is very telling. And the second that they mentioned Salinger, I thought, oh, this is just trying to be The Catcher in the Rye. There's a lot in this that's very like New Yorkers on their phones, looking down at their sticks of light, like they're the only points of happiness that they could own. And that kind of writing just makes me kind of annoyed, because phone's bad, sure. No one's denying it. We all hate that we're all on our phones. Look at the sky. Well, babe, you're about to kill yourself. Maybe look at the phone if it's going to make you happy. Psychophobia is fear of the soul. Psychometry, the measurement of the soul. Psychosepsis, an infection of the soul. Psychophilia, the love of the soul. Psychogenesis, the origin of the soul. Psychophagia, the eating of souls. Babe, I don't care. I read this on a bus in the rain, and it made me hate my life. And any book that includes the lines, "Love is just a chemical," and "all I have to fear is my own mind," I'm not buying it. Sorry. On to the next one. The only saving grace is that it actually didn't take me very long to read. I think I read it in like 2 days. Very short sections. A bit like the Eva Baltazar Permafrost, which I would say if you're looking for a book about someone who is depressed and suicidal and not to hate yourself reading it, I would say read Permafrost. So this book has a really special place in my heart. This is Neon Roses by Rachel Dawson, and it's not a classic. It's a little more fun than the other books I read this month. It's a love story, and I was really hoping to just read a nice love story this month. So this book follows Alun. Oh my god! I said I was going to check how to pronounce her name.
How do you pronounce these name? This is a name of Welsh origin, a girl's name, feminine. For more names from Welsh and other languages,
Julian.
make sure to state you. Elined.
Elined.
Stresses on that.
Elined. So Elined is a girl living in the Delay Valley in Wales at the time that the LGSM group, Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners, went to support the National Union of Miners strike, which, if you've seen the film Pride, banging film. And at first I was like, is this fan fiction? Is this fan fiction for Pride? But actually, I was so happy to see that the book follows a lot more than the plot beats in Pride. So we see the Pits and Perverts benefit, which Elined goes to, has a wonderful time. From the Welsh perspective, which obviously you don't really get in the film. But you also see Elined carry on her life. And it's great because you're really rooting for her. She's a very likeable main character. She's like super fabulous fat femme representation, which I haven't read enough of in lesbian romance. She's very confident even through all of the policing and the kind of degradation that she faces during the strikes. Her sister is dating a police officer who is very aggressive at the picket lines towards her and her family, her boyfriend, her father. So there's a very strong political backdrop, and you follow her as she falls for a member of LGSM called June, who comes to the village for a benefit and is fantastically described with this kind of like flat top, blonde haircut, Brummy accent. And I was like, yeah. And you're rooting for her because she knows what she wants, even though she hasn't realised she's gay. She immediately knows that she wants June, and June is pursued by her. It's a very natural plot. You really don't feel like it's too contrived. It's a very human book. You follow her and her relationship with June. And any book that mentions my lovely bookshop, obviously I will enjoy, just because it made me happy and excited. June and Elined take the Northern Line and Victoria Line to St Pancras. She emerges from the tube sweaty and squinting, but June doesn't let her rest. She hoofs them full lesbian speed through the squares of smart houses, black iron railings and neat green grass. There it is, Gay's the word. She's heard so much about it, but she's never been. Julie explains that today they are shaking buckets for Body Positive, a meeting group for people with HIV. 2 blokes come to relieve Elined and June, and they head back inside. June sits on the cash desk and devours a packet of prawn cocktail crisps, then lets the shop's giant white dog lick the neon orange dust off her fingers. Elined's never been in a gay bookshop before. It's overwhelming to see shelves full of gay lives, gay stories. She picks up a novel with 2 women in evening dresses on the cover. One of them is a redhead wearing a tight green pencil skirt. On a sunny day in London, Elined is surprised to feel that her anger has already cooled, giving way to something like nostalgia. I would really recommend it. It was really fun, especially if you've watched the film Pride and you liked it. Definitely give it a read. And if you're interested in 80s daiquiri, there's some good scenes in like a communal house. good dyke drama. And then the final book was a bit of letdown for me, because look at this fantastic cover. I really like it. Strange Girls by Sarvat Hasin. It's coming out in March 2026. I say like it's not 2026 right now. And I thought, oh, a fun complex friendship story about two friends from university who were very codependent while they were studying together, coming back into each other's lives with a big event from their past which has separated them, slowly teased out. It's like, that's the kind of thing I like. I like complex friendships, homoerotic tension, yearning. They're both very accurately pretentious for university students. There's Alia and Ava, which brings me to my first problem with this book, because the fact that they are Alia and Ava, they're both quite femme, they're both writers. You start to struggle with the perspective switching, because it basically goes Ava's perspective in the future, meeting Alia again, see, and Alia's perspective in the past, meeting Ava at university, but that's third person for some reason. And you switch back and forth, and it gets quite difficult to determine who is who. Alia is more shy, but she, in the end, is the one who writes a novel about Ava, who in the beginning of the book is the kind of decided, I'm going to write a book person of the pair. So the central conflict is the fact that Alia has written this book about Ava, kind of suggesting that Ava had a kind of toxic dependency on her. There's some really interesting dynamics at play, because Ava is Jewish, Alia is Muslim, and neither of them completely understand each other, but they claim to be the best friends in the world and never really articulate that difference. They can both overstep a little bit in their assumptions and their stereotypes about the other. They seem to have formed this attachment where if one of them is shy, the other one is confident, the confident one. If one of them is angry, the other one is placid. They feel that if one has an emotional range in one direction, the other one cannot have that emotional range, which I think was an interesting dynamic. And because Sarvat had given this book to the bookshop, and the reviews all seem to say fabulous homoerotic tension, queer. Ava is queer in the book, has had ex-girlfriends. They have a gay flatmate. I thought for sure there had been an event in their past, like a kiss. Maybe a drunken shag. I thought something had happened between them, at least a kiss. The only thing that seems to have happened, to have caused this big rift between them, is that they were gonna live together and then Alia said that she couldn't. Or it's that Ava had a boyfriend who was a bit older. Or Ava got her a Christmas present and Alia didn't. It's very small fry for what you think is being built up to in this book. And I almost felt, and I hesitate to use the word, a little bit like I'd been queer baited by this book. But perhaps it's on me for assuming that this codependent friendship had to have a romantic aspect. There is a moment where Alia holds Ava's face, or the other way around. And I thought, oh, it's happening. And then it didn't. The plot resolves by years later. Alia decides that actually she does want to live with Ava, which is incredibly confusing because in the time that's passed, Alia has had a husband and written a novel and become incredibly wealthy and successful. Suddenly turns around and says, let's try it. Would you though? How? Have you left your husband? Have you sold your house? You two aren't good together. I thought that was the point. Why are you now back together? So I'm a little I was a little frustrated with this book, and I felt like it was a bit of an anticlimax, which is unfortunate actually to end on, because there have been some fantastic books that I read this month. But I would say definitely the worst of them, this one. I wouldn't recommend this one, and I probably won't end up suggesting that we have it in Gay's the Word, because I don't think it's very gay. But I would say, if you're a writer, read this. If you want some fun, read this. If you want to feel a bit better about everything that's going on in the world and have a little escapism at the same time, read this. And if you are cool in any way, read this book. Those are my thoughts for January. I'm excited about Feb. At the moment I'm reading Orange by Curtis Garner, which is coming out in a couple of weeks. And I will check back in at the end of February, which I'm hoping is going to be a much brighter and nicer month for everyone. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know what I should read. I'm liking reading lots of different genres at the moment, but I think I'm going to read a few more boy books, because I've just realised that I read a lot of lesbians and the gay men do come into the shop sometimes, it has been said. Okay, much love. Take care of yourself. Bye bye.